Have you ever felt someone pull you in so deeply, only to disappear when you need them most? They'll make you feel chosen, then suddenly make you question if you were ever wanted at all. It's not random. It's not a mistake. It's a cycle, and once you're in it, it's almost impossible to see the strings they're pulling, how they hook you without you realizing. The avoidance love cycle doesn't start with distance. It starts with charm, intensity, and just enough emotional closeness to make you feel special. In the very beginning, they appear almost different from anyone you've met before. They're not overbearing, not desperate, not trying too hard, which, to someone tired of messy dating games, feels like a breath of fresh air. They'll give you the impression that they truly see you, that they're noticing details most people miss. The way your eyes light up when you laugh, the tiny habits you don't think anyone notices, the way you talk about the things you care about. This early stage is carefully balanced. They're not flooding you with attention like someone anxiously attached might. They give you just enough warmth to spark connection, but not so much that it scares them. And here's the truth. Avoidants are often more attuned in this phase than you think. They know, consciously or not, that the start is the safest place for them emotionally. At the beginning, you're not expecting too much. You're not asking for deep emotional intimacy yet. There's no threat of full vulnerability. This is when they can give you little pieces of themselves, fragments of charm, mystery, and vulnerability without feeling exposed. And you, in turn, begin to believe you've found someone emotionally mature, someone who isn't rushing, someone with depth. This first pull is addictive because it's measured. Unlike relationships that start at 100 miles an hour, the avoidance early pace feels almost deliberate, like they're not just falling for anyone, they're falling for you. It makes you feel chosen in a way that's rare. But here's where the first hidden hook is planted. They give you a taste of emotional closeness. And then, without warning, they pull back ever so slightly. Maybe they take a little longer to reply to your messages. Maybe they cancel a plan last minute. Maybe they seem quieter, more distracted. At first, you don't panic. You assume they're busy. But the part of you that felt that warm connection suddenly starts working. Harder to get it back. You replay your last conversation in your head, wondering if you said something wrong. You might even tell yourself, "It's fine. I'm probably just overthinking." And this right here, is how the avoidance love cycle tightens its grip. Because you've already had a taste of their warmth, their attention, their subtle way of making you feel special. And when that warmth disappears, even just a little, your nervous system notices the change, and you start chasing the feeling. In psychology, this is called intermittent reinforcement. It's the same mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. You don't get a reward every time you pull the lever, but when you do, it's so rewarding that you keep trying. With the avoidant, the early pull isn't just about attraction. It's about conditioning. They're teaching you without saying a word that their love, their attention, and their emotional presence will come and go. And in the beginning, you think that if you just do the right thing, you can keep the warmth constant. But the avoidant doesn't pull away because you did something wrong. They pull away because this is how they maintain emotional safety for themselves. Their subconscious belief is, if I get too close, I'll lose my independence. I'll be trapped. I'll be hurt. So they manage closeness by giving you a dose of intimacy, and then retreating before it feels too risky. To them, this feels safe. To you, it feels confusing. And here's the painful twist. That very confusion makes you bond even more deeply. Because instead of seeing the pullback as a warning sign, your mind interprets it as a challenge. You tell yourself, they just need to feel safe. I can show them I'm different. I can prove I'm worth staying close to. And so the cycle begins. The avoidant has now established the push-pull rhythm that will define your connection. They didn't do it with cruelty or obvious manipulation. In fact, some avoidants aren't even fully aware they're doing it. But that's what makes it even more dangerous. It feels real, genuine, and unintentional, which means you don't instinctively guard yourself against it. By the time you notice you're feeling emotionally unstable around them, high one day, low the next, you're already attached. And breaking away feels almost unthinkable, because in your mind, you're not just walking away from them. You're walking away from the version of yourself that felt so alive, so chosen, so deeply seen in those early days. And that's exactly why the first pull is so effective. It plants the seed for every stage that comes after. How they create emotional hunger without you realizing. The most dangerous part of the avoidance love cycle isn't the moment they disappear completely. It's the first real pullback. The first time you notice something's different, but you can't quite explain it. It's subtle at first. A slower reply to your messages. A sudden switch from warm conversation to short, factual responses. An energy shift. The tone in their voice. The way their eyes don't linger as long when you talk. And your mind starts working overtime to explain it away. Maybe they're stressed with work. Maybe they're tired. Maybe they just need some space. You don't panic, not yet. But you feel the change, and you can't ignore it. Here's what's actually happening. The avoidant has reached their closeness threshold. Every person with an avoidant attachment style has an internal alarm system that goes off when they feel too emotionally exposed. It's not always logical. Sometimes the alarm is triggered by something as simple as a deep conversation that felt too personal. Sometimes it's triggered by nothing at all, just the creeping fear of being in too deep. And when that alarm goes off, the avoidant instinctively pulls back to restore their sense of safety. To them, the pullback feels like self-preservation. To you, it feels like rejection. The danger is in how you respond. Because when someone who made you feel chosen suddenly feels distant, your natural instinct is to bridge the gap. You might start initiating more conversations. You might suggest meeting up. You might try harder to be interesting, supportive, or fun. Anything to reignite the closeness you felt before. And here's where it gets psychological. The more you try to close the gap, the more the avoidance alarm bells ring. They start to feel pursued. And pursued, in their mind, equals pressure. So they retreat even further. It's like trying to hug someone who keeps stepping back. You move forward. They step away. The more you move forward, the more they retreat. This is when the emotional hunger begins to take root in you. Because now you're not just missing their presence. You're craving the version of them from the beginning. The one who seemed so warm, so safe, so emotionally available. And that craving can become all-consuming. You start replaying old conversations in your head. You scroll back through their messages. You cling to every small sign of warmth. A smile, a compliment, a slightly longer text. As proof that the closeness isn't gone. But the avoidant is now in self-protection mode. They're not thinking about how their distance affects you. They're thinking about how closeness affects them. And here's the irony. While you're feeling anxious, rejected, or even desperate, they're often feeling relief. Because to them, the space restores their sense of control. But that relief doesn't mean they want you gone. Far from it. Avoidants don't typically want to lose their partner. They just want the connection to exist at a distance that feels emotionally safe for them, which means they often find subtle ways to keep you engaged, just enough to prevent you from walking away. A quick check-in text, a small compliment, a playful comment on your social media post. And because you've been starving for emotional closeness, these tiny gestures feel huge. You tell yourself, they do care. They're just going through something. You believe the warmth is still there. And if you can just be patient, it'll come back in full. But here's the trap. The warmth never comes back in the same way as the beginning. Not consistently. Instead, you get bursts of closeness followed by periods of withdrawal. And without realizing it, your nervous system is now living in a constant state of push and pull. This is where the emotional dependency really takes hold, because your brain starts to link love with uncertainty. You stop feeling safe in stability. You start associating safety with the relief you feel when they finally come closer again. It's not a healthy pattern, but in the moment, it feels intoxicating. The avoidance pullback isn't just distance. It's a reset in the cycle. It keeps you from ever reaching the emotional intimacy you truly want, but it also keeps you from fully letting go. And here's the most devastating part. Every time they pull away, you adjust your expectations a little lower. You accept less consistency. You excuse more emotional absence. You tell yourself you're okay with the distance, when deep down, you're starving for the closeness they only give in rare doses. By the time you realize how much you've adapted to their pattern, you've already given up parts of your emotional needs just to keep the connection alive. And exactly that is how they keep you hooked. How they pull you back in without you realizing. Just when you've started to wonder if they're slipping away for good, they come back. Not with a grand gesture, not with a full, heartfelt apology, but with just enough warmth to make your heart breathe again. It might be a late-night text that feels surprisingly intimate, a nostalgic memory they bring up from the early days, a small act of kindness that feels out of nowhere but reminds you of the version of them you fell for. And just like that, your nervous system lights up. See, in the avoidance cycle, the rehook phase is just as important as the pullback. Because without it, the distance they create could push you out of their orbit completely. They don't necessarily think of it as strategy. It's not always a calculated move. It's more like an instinct, a way to keep you tethered while still protecting their own emotional limits. The truth is, avoidants aren't comfortable with too much closeness or too much distance. Too much closeness triggers their fear of losing independence. Too much distance triggers their fear of losing the connection entirely. So the rehook is their way of rebalancing. And here's where the trap becomes even more dangerous for you. Because after enduring their coldness, even the smallest show of warmth feels huge. It feels like progress. It feels like they've realized what they were missing. But more often than not, they haven't changed. What's changed is the level of deprivation you've been living with. You've gone without emotional closeness for long enough that even a crumb feels like a feast, and your brain reacts accordingly. Here's what happens neurologically. When someone gives you inconsistent affection, your brain releases dopamine in unpredictable bursts. That unpredictability, that uncertainty, is exactly what creates emotional addiction. It's the same principle behind gambling addiction. You never know when the reward will come, but when it does, it lights up your entire system. You become hooked, not on the reward itself, but on the hope of the next one. So when the avoidant sends that sweet message, calls you unexpectedly, or shows up with affection, your body floods with relief. Your hope spikes. Your emotional hunger quiets for a moment. And you think, we're back to normal. They still care. We're okay. This moment of relief is where many people make the same mistake. They take the rehook as proof that the relationship is safe, that the distance was just a phase, and so they stop questioning the cycle. They stop looking at the bigger pattern because the present moment feels good again. But the rehook isn't a reset to the start of your love story. It's simply another turn in the cycle. Soon enough, the avoidant will start to feel that creeping closeness again. The alarm will go off, and the pullback will begin all over. This is why the cycle can go on for years without resolution. Every time you start to drift away emotionally, the avoidant reels you back in just enough to keep you from truly leaving. And it works because those moments of warmth are so intoxicating. Here's something to notice. During the rehook phase, the avoidant often mirrors the very behavior they used in the honeymoon stage of the relationship, but in a much smaller, controlled dose. If they used to send you long, thoughtful messages, they might now send you a single meaningful line. If they once surprised you with a day out, now it might just be a short coffee meetup. If they once opened up emotionally, they might now share a single personal thought. It's enough to spark the memory of who they were with you, enough to reignite the bond in your mind. But here's the critical difference. This time, the warmth doesn't last long enough to truly rebuild trust. It's more like a quick emotional charge, a top-up before they retreat again. And because your nervous system is now trained to chase these highs, you become less focused on building a healthy, secure connection and more focused on simply getting that next hit of warmth. This is how the avoidant keeps you emotionally invested without giving you full emotional availability. Some people describe this phase as feeling seen again, but in a fleeting way, like catching sunlight through the clouds for just a moment. It's warm, it's beautiful, and it makes you forget about the long stretch of gray sky you've been under. But the clouds always roll back in. What's worse is that the rehook can make you doubt your own boundaries. If you've been telling yourself, if they pull away again, I'll leave, that single burst of affection can make you soften. You think, maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I just needed to be patient. And just like that, the cycle resets. The avoidant doesn't need to give you constant attention to keep you hooked. They just need to interrupt your frustration with a taste of the closeness you've been craving. It's not about convincing you to stay logically. It's about keeping your heart tied to the possibility of what you know they're capable of, because you've seen it before. That's the cruel genius of the rehook. It doesn't promise change. It promises hope. And hope is what keeps most people from breaking free. When hope turns into self-blame, the moment you stop feeling frustrated at their distance, the moment you start making excuses for it, that's when the cycle shifts into its most dangerous stage. Because now, the problem isn't just that they pull away. It's that you've started to believe you are the reason they pull away. This doesn't happen overnight. It's slow, subtle, a drip feed of doubt over weeks or months. One day you're saying, why are they being so cold? The next, you're asking, what am I doing wrong? And the shift feels natural, even logical. Because in the rehook phase, when they finally gave you warmth again, you felt like you had done something right. So it's easy to assume that when they turn cold, you've somehow done something wrong. This is where avoidant dynamics become deeply tangled with your own self-worth. The avoidant, often without meaning to, teaches you that their affection is conditional, not in words, but in patterns. You start to believe you must earn closeness. And when you can't figure out the formula, you try harder. This is the emotional equivalent of chasing a slot machine jackpot. You keep feeding it energy, time, and love, hoping that this time it will finally pay out big. But just like a slot machine, it's not about skill. It's about the system being designed to keep you trying. You might start analyzing every interaction. Was I too needy? Did I share too much? Should I have waited to reply? Every text you send feels like it might tip the balance. Every moment you see them online, but not responding feels like a sign. And the more you overthink, the more the relationship stops feeling like a place where you can just be. It becomes a constant test you're trying to pass. Here's the heartbreaking truth. The avoidant isn't sitting there thinking about how you failed the test. They're not even thinking about the test. They're reacting to their own internal alarms. Alarms that are triggered by closeness, not by your flaws. But because avoidants rarely explain this cycle to you, often because they don't fully understand it themselves, you're left to fill in the gaps with self-blame. This self-blame can sound like, maybe if I'm more independent, they'll come closer. If I don't talk about my feelings so much, maybe they won't pull away. I'll give them space, and maybe they'll miss me. This self-blame can sound like, maybe if I'm more independent, they'll come closer. If I don't talk about my feelings so much, maybe they won't pull away. I'll give them space, and maybe they'll miss me. The danger here is that you start shrinking parts of yourself. You stop sharing your needs. You stop expressing your fears. You make yourself smaller, hoping it will make them stay longer. And at first, it might seem like it works, because your reduced demands give them room to breathe. But in reality, you're just delaying the inevitable. The avoidant will still pull away, not because of what you said or did, but because their nervous system is wired to react that way to intimacy. Over time, this self-blame rewires your own nervous system. Instead of asking, "Am I happy here?" you start asking, "How do I keep them happy?" You move from being a partner in the relationship to being the caretaker of its survival. And the cruelest part? This makes you more tolerant of bad treatment, because you've been taught that love is something you must constantly prove you deserve, not something freely given. I've seen people in this stage defend the avoidance behavior to friends and family. They'll say things like, "They're just stressed with work. They're not great at texting, but they still care. They've had a rough past. I just need to be patient." While some of those statements might be true, they're often used to mask a deeper truth. You're afraid that if you acknowledge how much this hurts, you'll have to face the possibility of letting go. The self-blame stage also makes you incredibly sensitive to any change in their behavior. If they respond quickly to a message, your hope rises. If they're short or distracted, your anxiety spikes. Your emotional stability becomes tied to their unpredictable rhythm. This isn't love. It's emotional dependency. Love can absolutely be deep, intense, and passionate, but it should also feel safe. It should make you feel more yourself, not less. When you're in this stage with an avoidant, safety gets replaced with scarcity. Instead of feeling secure in their love, you're constantly managing the risk of losing it. And here's what's so important to understand. The avoidant isn't always trying to hurt you. Many of them genuinely care, but their fear of closeness overrides their ability to stay consistently connected. So every time you think, "If I just do this one thing differently, they'll stop pulling away," you're trying to solve a problem that exists inside their emotional wiring, not inside your behavior. Breaking this stage is incredibly hard because by now, you've been through enough cycles to have both evidence of their affection and evidence of their distance. And the affection feels like proof that your efforts work. But here's the thing. The affection probably isn't the result of your adjustments. It's the natural rhythm of the avoidant cycle: closeness, alarm, distance, rehook. Over and over again. If you see the pattern clearly, you can start to break the self-blame loop. But if you don't, you'll keep thinking, "Maybe if I just try one more time." And that's how people lose years of their lives to relationships that never truly change. The way out isn't about perfecting your approach to them. It's about reclaiming the belief that your needs are valid, that you don't have to earn love through emotional self-erasure. Because once you stop blaming yourself, you stop playing the game the cycle depends on. But letting go of self-blame isn't just about walking away. It's about understanding what kept you there in the first place, and why the avoidance final move in the cycle can make breaking free feel impossible, why it's so hard to walk away. If you've ever tried to leave an avoidant and failed, you know it's not just about missing them. It's about how the last stage of their cycle pulls at something primal inside you, something that can override logic, self-protection, and even the memory of all the pain. Because just when you're exhausted, just when you've said, "I can't do this anymore," they switch. The coldness softens. The distance closes. They say the words you've been aching to hear, and it feels like everything you've been fighting for is finally here. As if all the suffering had a purpose. As if they've finally got it. This is the rehook. The point where the avoidant gives you enough warmth to reset the entire cycle. It's not always manipulative in intent. For many avoidants, this moment is genuine. They've had the space their nervous system craved. The alarm bells in their head have quieted, and now they feel safe enough to move closer again. But here's the trap. When they come back, you're not meeting them in a neutral emotional space. You're meeting them from a place of relief. Relief that the coldness is over. Relief that you didn't lose them. Relief that maybe, just maybe, you won't have to start all over again with someone else. And relief is intoxicating. It can feel like love itself. Your body floods with dopamine and oxytocin. Not because the relationship has truly healed, but because the stress cycle you've been living in has temporarily ended. It's like finally taking a deep breath after holding it for too long. The air rushes in so fast, you can't think about anything else. And in that moment, you might forgive almost anything. The unanswered messages, the cold silences, the avoidance of emotional depth. Because right now, you're getting what you wanted all along: connection. Here's the problem. This final hook doesn't just erase your doubts. It rewrites your memory of the entire relationship. You start thinking, maybe I overreacted. Maybe they just needed time. See, we're fine now. And all the moments that hurt you start to feel smaller, less important. This is how the avoidant love cycle sustains itself for years. It's not the distance alone that keeps you stuck. It's the return. Because the return is just enough to make you believe it could be different next time. And here's the really tricky part. The return often happens when you pull back. Avoidance can sense when they're losing you, even if they're the ones who created the distance. The thought of truly losing the connection can spark panic in them. So they close the gap. They send the message. They show up at your door. They make the grand gesture. And suddenly, you're not walking away anymore. You're holding on again tighter than before. You might even see this as progress. Look, they came after me. That means they care. And in a way, it does mean they care. But caring doesn't erase a pattern that keeps hurting you. If you stay, you'll almost always find yourself back in the same cycle. Warmth, closeness, alarm, distance, and eventually another rehook. The only thing that changes is how good they get at pulling you back. Breaking free from this final hook requires something most people underestimate. Not just walking away, but walking away while the warmth is still there. Because if you wait until they go cold again, you'll be too depleted to fight for yourself. And if you wait for them to come back, you'll be too relieved to remember why you wanted to leave. This is why some people only leave avoidant relationships after a moment of unexpected clarity. A moment when they see the pattern so clearly that no amount of warmth can hide it. If you're listening to this and it feels painfully familiar, You might already be closer to that moment than you think, because awareness is the one thing that weakens the cycle. Once you see it for what it is, the rehook doesn't feel as magical. It feels strategic, predictable. And when something becomes predictable, it loses its power to control you. The avoidance final hook isn't proof you're meant to be together. It's proof that you've been caught in a system that feeds itself on hope and fear. The hope that they'll stay warm. The fear that if you leave, you'll never find this connection again. But here's the truth they'll never tell you. You will find this connection again. And next time, it won't come with conditions. You are not too much. You are not too needy. You are not impossible to love. You've just been trying to bloom in soil that keeps pulling away from your roots. If you take nothing else from this, take this. Love that makes you doubt your worth isn't love you have to keep. And if hearing this gave you even the smallest spark of clarity, hold on to it. Because the next time the avoidance warmth returns, that spark might be the thing that keeps you from getting pulled back in. Your life is too short to keep circling the same emotional drain. Choose the kind of love that stays warm even when life gets hard. If this message reached you at the right time, subscribe, because the next one I share could be the one that finally sets you free. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, send it to them. You never know whose life you might change.